Hi there. Thanks for joining in today. And if it's your first time here, welcome on board. It's so good to have you on this platform. Today we are looking at Q1E10, the rules of engagement. Are you ready? Let's do this. Previously in Q1E9, we peel back the veil, exposing the stark reality of a cosmic conflict, a celestial struggle that intertwines the activities of God and his created being gone rogue, Satan, but also involves the fate of humanity. Today, we are embarking on a daring quest to decipher the enigmatic rules of engagement governing this cosmic conflict. Our compass, the chronicles of ancient patriarchs whose lives serve as cryptic maps through this ancestral battleground. As we traverse this mystic terrain, expect detours, each one a deliberate plunge into the depths of divine strategy. If you recall, in our last session, the parable of tares and wheat, it unveiled an insidious adversary, an entity once celestial, now rogue, challenging the very fabric of divine order. But this revelation was merely a whisper of the grander saga. Journey with me now to the cryptic passage of Daniel 10 from verse 1 to 12, where the curtain lifts, granting us a rare glimpse into the behind the veil skirmishes of this cosmic war. Here the supernatural and mortal intertwine, revealing the profound stakes of this celestial contention. Let's do this. It was the third year of Cyrus, the king of Persia, around 535 to 537 BC. The prophet Daniel was thrust into a vision, a revelation so profound it is recorded as true but burdened with great conflict. The nature of this vision is shrouded in mystery, yet its impact on Daniel is palpable, stirring a tempest within his soul. So, in verse 2 and 3, on the third day of the first month of the Jewish calendar, Daniel engages in a profound spiritual protocol, a disciplined regimen of prayer and fasting. Now, this deliberate act is not mere ritual, but a strategic maneuver observed among patriarchs who often experience God beyond the conventional. Now, herein lies our inaugural rule of engagement in this celestial warfare: prayer. This is our channel of communicating with God and accessing the privileges of His presence as we engage. Perfection in articulation is not a prerequisite, but sincerity is the key. As articulated in Desire of Ages, every sincere prayer is heard in heaven. If the heart is in it, it will ascend to the sanctuary where Jesus ministers, and He will present it to the Father, beautiful and fragrant with the incense of His own perfection. Desire of Ages, page 667, paragraph 3. Now, fast forward to the narrative in Mark chapter 9. As Jesus ascends the mountain for transfiguration with Peter, James, and John, a desperate father seeks deliverance for his son who was demon-possessed from the rest of the disciples downhill. Despite their prior success in healing and exorcism, as we find in Mark 6 from verse 7 to 13, they find themselves impotent against this formidable foe. Now, upon his return, Jesus effortlessly expels the tormenting spirits, leaving the disciples in a state of humbled bewilderment. The inquiry into their failure elicits a profound revelation from Jesus. In his words, this kind can come out by nothing but by prayer and fasting, as you find in Mark 9:29. This declaration unveils a deeper layer of spiritual engagement. Certain divine interventions necessitate an elevated commitment through prayer and fasting. Now back to Daniel. So for 3 full weeks, Daniel sought the Lord in prayer and fasting while still going about the king's business. The first week went by, nothing happened. The second week, not a word. 20 days later, still nothing. Now, for a prophet who was accustomed to swift divine responses, as evidenced in chapters 2, 7, 8, and 9, this silence must have been very disturbing, like a crucible of faith. Yet, he persisted, embodying the essence of unwavering devotion till the 21st day. So, on the 21st day of his fast, in the midst of a very hectic routine of his royal duties, Daniel found himself by the banks of the mighty Tigris River. And suddenly, the veil between the seen and unseen was torn asunder. There was an open divine visitation in a public space in response to his prayers. The same arena, the same ministration, yet different experiences by those in the same arena. While others ran for cover in fear, Daniel was engaging with the heavenly messenger. How often this experience repeats itself in the assembly of God's people. While to some the assembly of God's people might be the most boring place to be, to others, the same worship session presents an opportunity to reconnect with their Heavenly Father and the privileges of His presence. The difference? A preparation prior entering into His presence. And this brings us to our second rule of engagement: the necessity of intentional preparation before entering into the divine presence in order to access the full privileges of His presence. Daniel's deliberate spiritual readiness granted him an audience with the heavenly realm, a testament to the power of earnest preparations. There are exceptions, no doubt, but we cannot afford to make the exceptions the rule. Okay, moving on. From verse 12, the heavenly messenger unravels some behind-the-scenes details that both addresses some questions but also raises some other concerns. Now, this is what he had to say. From the first day that you set your heart to understand and humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, meaning your prayers were answered 21 days ago, and I have come in response to them. Now, what seemed like a silence, a delay, was actually a work in progress. Question is, why the delay then? Well, verse 13 addresses that and narrates, "But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me." Meaning, though an angel had been sent in answer to Daniel's prayers 21 days earlier, evil forces contended with him to undermine a manifestation of the answered outcome. But Paul puts it this way: for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places, as we find in Ephesians 6 verse 12. Now this introduces our third rule of engagement, recognizing that our struggle transcends the physical realm, necessitating spiritual weaponry to overcome. Brother Paul puts it this way: the weapons of our warfare in this cosmic conflict are not carnal, but they are mighty through God, meaning they are spiritual, to the pulling down of strongholds. Now, while Gabriel's revelation explains the delay, the concerning part is that the evil forces actually succeeded, at least for a while. If they did for 20 days in Daniel's case, they might for a longer period for other people, and that's concerning. And that brings us to our first question today. If, like we learned in our last session, Q1E9, that the devil is a created being and therefore is finite and limited, how then do we explain him contending successfully with an emissary of the omnipotent God? Doesn't make any sense. What exactly does that mean? Okay, so let's start with what it does not mean. Satan, though formidable, remains a created being, as we find in Ezekiel 28, inherently limited and subordinate to his creator. The narrative of Job underscores this truth, where Satan operates strictly within the parameters set by God. This rules out the possibility of it being a contest of strength. Now, correlating to his antics in Eden with Eve, it makes sense to assume that this was an indirect contest, a profound battle over influence, particularly over the hearts and minds of leaders like Cyrus, in this case, the king of Persia at the time. If you recall, over a century even before his birth, in Isaiah 44 from verse 23 to 45 verse 8, Prophet Isaiah had prophesied about God using Cyrus to 1. Punish Babylon for their overcorrection of the Jewish nation, 2. Liberate his remnants from their captivity in Babylon, and 3. Initiate the reconstruction of Jerusalem. Jeremiah, on the other hand, had prophesied the exact duration of their captivity in Babylon. You'll find in Jeremiah 25 from verse 9 to 13, 70 years. And after which God will employ Cyrus to fulfill his word. The captivity happened in around 605 BC when Daniel was taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah. You'll find in Daniel chapter 1 verse 1. At the time of this Daniel 10 encounter at the bank of the Tigris River, it was already 3rd year of the reign of Cyrus over Persia, around 535 to 537 BC, the dates vary, suggesting that it was ripe for the Jews to return and rebuild Jerusalem. It was 70 years already. And since these events had to happen under the watch of Cyrus, the king of Persia, he had a role to play. But from the context of the text, it appeared some formidable spiritual forces of darkness held sway over Cyrus's mind to sabotage fulfillment of this prophecy and all that it portends, as we read in Ezra. For 3 weeks, the angelic messenger contended with these forces, striving to, 1, counteract the manipulation and influences of these spiritual forces over the mind of the king, that he may do the needful, while still striving and navigating through respecting his free will at the same time. We see the physical manifestation of the victory of Gabriel's intervention in the restraining of the enemy's forces throughout the reigns of Cyrus and his son Cambyses. Now, this underscores our fourth rule of engagement: God's unwavering respect for human free will, a foundation of his government. He may guide, inspire, and urge, but he never imposes obedience or compels worship. All right, let's recapitulate the elucidated rules of engagement thus far. You ready? Let's go. A. Rules of engagement for us. Number 1. There are certain privileges of his presence that, though available, can only be accessed through certain protocols by prayer and fasting, as we find in Mark 9:29. Number 2. In the first 5 verses of Mark 6, we see an interesting story play out. Jesus goes visiting his hometown Nazareth, but they summarily rejected him. And because of their unbelief, they missed out on all the miraculous deliverances that he would have gladly offered had they believed. Unbelief, the opposite of faith, is a stumbling block to accessing the privileges of his presence. Number 3. A deliberate preparation preceding entering into his presence is needed in order to access the privileges of his presence. Do not make the exceptions the rule. And number 4. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities. Therefore, our weapons of warfare are not carnal, but they are mighty in God for pulling down strongholds. Part B. The rules of engagement for God. Number 1. In this cosmic conflict, God does not always use force. There are rules of engagement that even his angels must follow. For instance, God will not interfere with our free will. He may nudge, woo, and influence, but he will neither compel obedience nor force worship. The adversary, on the other hand, exploits every avenue possible to force compliance to his preferences. Number 2. While omnipotent, God permits the adversary a measure of freedom within defined limits to the extent he has committed his word, the specifics of which remain beyond our comprehension. How do we know this? Well, the narrative of Job offers a glimpse into this dynamic, illustrating the boundaries within which the adversary operates. One of the other places we see this play out is in the prophetic revelation of the symbiotic relationship between the adversary, aka the dragon, and the monarchs of this world in the book of Revelation. Revelation 12:7-9 reveals that, having lost his place in heaven, his primary objective has always been to undermine God by sabotaging his creation, and his influence spans across a world. Now, Revelation 13:1-8 tells us how. He recruits the monarchs of this world, but in particular, an earthly religio-political power and a lamb-like beast from the earth as his lieutenants, empowering them with his PTA, his power, his throne, and his authority to accomplish his objectives, being usurp the worship that's due to God. 2. Misrepresent and malign God's character. And 3. Persecute the saints of God for a designated period. But thankfully, his activities are not unchecked. We also see this play out in the book of Job, from chapter 1 to 2, verse 1 to 7. From verse 1 to 5, we are introduced to the man Job, a blameless and upright man who loved and served the Lord with all his heart. From verse 6 to 8, we are introduced to some behind the scene details that Job was not privy to. And it reads, "One day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. Then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil.'" Now verse 9 to 12 reads, "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied, "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." We glean some very relevant details from this peek into this behind the scenes scoop. Number 1, this appears to be some kind of heavenly council scene, one that involves other celestial beings. And interestingly, the adversary had access to this meeting. Number 2, God did not waste time in engaging Satan by throwing what seemed like an open challenge. "Have you considered my servant Job? He is a blameless and upright man," almost suggesting that there was an ongoing controversy between these two. And it seemed the adversary had a thing or two for blameless and upright people. You will immediately notice from the adversary's response a confirmation of our suspicion. "Does Job fear God for nothing?" he said. Something is definitely going on between these two. He goes on to add another insightful piece of information. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything that he has?" Implying that Satan was very much aware of this brother and may have in the past unsuccessfully attempted to attack him, but could not get past certain restraints put in place by God. And that brings us to rule of engagement number 5. His open confession of this fact acknowledges that Satan only operates within the confines of God's permission and no further. And he knows it, underscoring the supremacy of divine authority. You will notice in this account that God actually increased Satan's security clearance, allowing him some room to operate in the life of Job, even if it was regulated. But why? Why would he do that? Now think of it this way. This controversy is about the character of God. If God must contrast the difference between his character and principles from that of Satan before all the spectators in heaven and on earth, it makes sense that the adversary is allowed room to operate. For it is in this operation that his true character is made manifest. Through it all, though not privy to all these details, Job stayed the course, even to the point of losing his wealth, health, and 10 children. God eventually restored him fully. What to remember thus far? Number one of the major takeaways from this account is the reaffirmation of the reality of the cosmic conflict between God and his creator being gone rogue, and that certain events manifested in the physical realm are a direct consequence of events behind the scenes. Regardless of how bad it gets, good always triumphs over evil in the long run. Remember that. Number two, the persistence of evil under divine sovereignty highlights the complexities introduced by free will. God's respect for human autonomy means that he does not coerce behavior, allowing individuals to make choices that can lead to good, bad, and sometimes, unfortunately, to suffering. This dynamic limits immediate divine intervention against evil. Number three, the existence of free will and established rules of engagement implies that not all the outcomes are solely determined by God. This framework influences God's capacity, or better still, his moral ability to eradicate evil instantly, leading some to question his nature or even his existence. It is crucial to recognize that the interplay of various factors, including human choices and rules of engagement, they all contribute to the current state of the world. It is not all up to God. Now, considering those other members of the Heavenly Council meeting, think about this. If you were one of them witnessing this open challenge thrown and accepted, A, will you be curious to know what happened? Will you want to wait to read about the outcome in the news headlines, or will you be watching it live if you could? My guess is the latter. What are the chances that similar scenarios are replaying today? The only difference being that, like Job, we are now the actors on stage for the full view of heaven and all those unfallen heavenly council members. Question is, would we stay the course regardless of what gets thrown at us, like Job, even if we do not fully understand all the whys behind the whats, or not? As always, don't tell me, show God. And that's it for the week, folks. Next week, we dive into the topic, what more could I have done? You don't want to miss this. Until then, stay the course. I remain your Sabbath Doodle, doodling out. Let's make it make sense. If you were blessed by this session today, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you are notified as soon as we publish. If you have not yet given your life to Christ, you should while you still can. I'll see you next Sabbath, God willing. Happy Sabbath.